Welcome to the most watched entertainment program in the known galaxy, folks. The Galactic Survival Championship, where supposedly primitive species get dropped on hostile worlds to fight for their lives while trillions of viewers place bets on who dies first. Think of it as reality television, but with actual death and significantly worse camera work. This season's twist? They're including humans for the first time. Yes, those bipedal disaster magnets from that little blue marble in the unfashionable arm of the Milky Way. The same species that somehow invented both nuclear weapons and reality cooking shows within the same century. The producers, a collection of overpaid Vraxian executives who've never spent a day outside climate-controlled studios, are practically salivating over their latest contestants. Finally, declares head producer Klaxon during the pre-show briefing, his tentacles writhing with excitement, a species primitive enough to make this interesting again. These humans barely discovered fire a few thousand rotations ago. They still hit things with sticks. Cut to the human selection process, which went about as well as you'd expect. The Galactic Broadcasting Consortium sent their talent scouts to Earth with one mission: find the most helpless specimens possible. Instead, they got Marcus Webb, a former Marine who looks like he could bench press a small spacecraft, and has the kind of smile that suggests he's already figured out 17 ways to kill you with a paperclip. Then there's Luna Rodriguez, an aerospace engineer who spent her interview quietly calculating the structural weaknesses in the alien ship while politely answering questions about her hobbies. Her idea of relaxation involves building drones from spare electronics, which should have been the producer's first red flag. And finally, Pete Thompson, a farmer from Iowa, who the scouts selected because he works with primitive agriculture and seemed harmless enough. What they didn't realize is that Pete's family has been farming the same land for 6 generations, which means he knows more about making things grow, die, or explode than most species know about their own biology. The rules are simple, or so the aliens think. No advanced technology allowed, no energy weapons, no quantum communicators, no molecular assemblers, just basic tools, and whatever you can scavenge or build. 7 days on Kepler 442c. A charming little death trap with carnivorous plants, acid rain, and wildlife that considers everything smaller than a transport shuttle to be a light snack. Last species standing wins 10 million galactic credits and the dubious honor of being declared most savage primitives in the galaxy. This will be hilarious, Klaxon tells his production team while reviewing the human files. Look at these creatures. They're so dependent on their technology they probably can't even start a fire without their electronic devices. 3 days, maximum, before they're begging to be rescued. His assistant, a nervous Quellan named Fizz, raises a chitinous appendage. Sir, shouldn't we be concerned about their military history? According to these records, they've been at war for their entire recorded civilization. Klaxon waves dismissively. Primitive warfare. Throwing rocks and sharp sticks at each other. Completely different from real combat. He pauses the holographic display on an image of Marcus in full military gear. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? They make a pointy stick. Oh, Klaxon. Sweet, naive, soon-to-be unemployed Klaxon. If only you knew that humans don't just make pointy sticks. They make pointy sticks with other pointy sticks attached to them. And then they figure out how to throw those pointy sticks really, really far. And then they get creative. The transport ships descend through Kepler 442c's atmosphere, like falling stars, which is poetic until you realize that several species are already motion sick before they even land. The planet looks exactly like what happens when a cosmic designer gets drunk and decides to make everything either poisonous, carnivorous, or both. First to disembark are the Zephyrians, crystalline beings who shimmer like living gemstones and immediately begin arguing about the optimal mineral composition of the landing site. Their leader, a prism-shaped individual named Quartz, declares that their superior photosynthetic abilities will make this competition trivial. They start unpacking what can only be described as the galaxy's most expensive camping gear, all apparently made from compressed starlight and good intentions. Next come the mucoids, who look like someone crossed a slug with a philosophy professor and gave the result anxiety issues. They ooze out of their transport in a dignified procession, leaving a trail of luminescent slime that probably violates several environmental protection laws. Their representative, Glomulus, announces that their advanced biochemistry will allow them to literally digest any challenge this primitive world can offer. The Thornbacks arrive with military precision, their insectoid forms clicking and chittering as they establish a perimeter around their landing zone. These guys look like someone gave a mantis anger management issues and a weapons budget. Their squad leader, Mandible, immediately begins scanning for threats while his subordinates argue about proper hive hierarchy protocols. And then there are the humans. Marcus steps off the transport, takes one look around, and starts laughing. Not nervous laughter, mind you. The kind of laughter that suggests he's just spotted exactly the kind of fun he was hoping for. Luna follows, already examining the local flora with the focused intensity of someone mentally cataloging which plants are edible, which ones are poisonous, and which ones can be weaponized. Pete brings up the rear, casually sampling the soil between his fingers while the other species are still figuring out which end is up. While the Zephyrians debate the feng shui of potential campsites and the Thornbacks conduct a 15-minute briefing on proper formation movement, Marcus has wandered off and returned with an armload of dry wood. By the time the mucoids finish arguing about whether the local bacteria might upset their digestive processes, there's already a cheerful fire crackling in the human camp. "How did you do that so quickly?" demands Quartz, their crystalline form reflecting the firelight in a way that's probably very pretty but also completely useless for actual survival. Marcus grins and holds up 2 sticks. "Bow drill. Humans figured this out about 40,000 years ago. You rub this one against that one real fast, and physics does the rest." The alien contestants exchange what can only be described as concerned glances. The Galactic Broadcasting Consortium's primitive species are making fire while the supposedly advanced civilizations are still reading the instruction manuals for their Stone Age starter kits. In the orbiting command center, producer Klaxon stares at the monitoring screens with growing unease. "That's not possible," he mutters. "The fire-making challenge isn't supposed to happen until day 2. Fizz nervously adjusts the camera angles. "Sir, should we inform the contestants about the proper sequence of survival activities?" "No," Klaxon says, though his tentacles are now twitching with what might be early onset panic. "Maybe it's just beginner's luck. They'll struggle with everything else." Down on the planet's surface, Pete has identified 3 different edible root vegetables. Luna has begun constructing what appears to be a water filtration system using nothing but rocks and plant fibers, and Marcus is testing the balance on a spear he somehow crafted while the aliens were still unpacking their regulation camping equipment. Day 1 hasn't even officially started, and the humans are already making everyone else look like they showed up to a survival competition with a computer science degree and a really confident attitude. By hour 6 of the official competition, the situation has devolved from entertaining reality television to cosmic embarrassment with a body count. The Zephyrians, those shimmering crystalline beings who were supposed to dominate through superior photosynthetic abilities, have discovered a fundamental flaw in their survival strategy. Turns out, when your entire species evolved on a planet with 3 suns and permanent daylight, the concept of making fire when it gets dark never really came up in evolutionary planning meetings. Quartz stands over a pile of regulation survival sticks, striking them together with increasing desperation. "This is impossible," they declare, their prismatic form flickering with frustration. "Fire requires plasma temperatures of at least 10,000 degrees. These primitive tools cannot generate sufficient thermal energy." Meanwhile, 20 meters away, Marcus is teaching Luna how to improve her fire-starting technique, using a method his grandfather showed him when he was 7 years old. The irony is completely lost on the Zephyrians, who are now debating whether to file a formal complaint about the impossibility of the challenge. The mucoids are facing their own existential crisis. Glomulus, their slimy philosopher leader, made the unfortunate discovery that their luminescent trail, which looks absolutely stunning in low light, also serves as a dinner bell for every carnivorous creature within a 5-kilometer radius. They've spent the entire day trying to figure out how to move without leaving a glowing breadcrumb trail for predators. Perhaps Glomulus suggests to his increasingly panicked team, "We should remain stationary until we can develop a non-bioluminescent locomotion method." This brilliant strategy lasts exactly 47 minutes, until a pack of what can only be described as wolves but with more teeth and worse attitudes follows their slime trail right to their camp. The mucoids spend the next 3 hours hiding behind rocks while the wolves investigate their abandoned supplies, which explains why Pete finds them huddled in a cave, whimpering about the unfairness of biological disadvantages. "You folks seem to be having some trouble," Pete observes with the kind of helpful tone that suggests he's about to solve their problem in a way that will make them feel incredibly stupid. He produces a handful of seeds from his pocket and scatters them around the cave entrance. "These little beauties smell terrible to most predators. Grows wild back home, but it works on most mammals with decent noses." The Thornbacks, meanwhile, are engaged in their own special brand of disaster. These militaristic insectoids brought superior organization, tactical training, and a command structure that would make a Pentagon general weep with envy. They also brought the kind of rigid hierarchy that crumbles faster than a house of cards in a hurricane when nobody can agree who's actually in charge without their electronic rank verification systems. Mandible, the self-appointed squad leader, is currently engaged in a heated argument with his subordinate Chiton about proper resource allocation protocols. This debate has been going on for 4 hours and has covered everything from optimal perimeter establishment to the philosophical implications of fire-making in primitive societies. Meanwhile, their third team member, Carapace, has been standing at attention the entire time, waiting for orders that will never come because his superiors are too busy arguing about who has the authority to give them. Luna wanders over during one of their particularly intense disputes about shelter construction methodology. "You guys might want to prioritize actually building something before it rains," she mentions casually, pointing at the gathering storm clouds. "Those look like they mean business. Rain tactical assessment is not your responsibility." Primitive mandible snaps. "We have superior meteorological prediction capabilities." This confidence lasts exactly until the first drops of acid rain begin dissolving their expensive military-grade equipment. Back in the orbiting command center, producer Klaxon is discovering what happens when your entire career is built on the assumption that primitive means incompetent. The ratings are through the roof, but not for the reasons he expected. Instead of watching advanced alien civilizations gracefully adapt to primitive conditions, viewers across the galaxy are witnessing the most technologically sophisticated species in known space getting schooled by 3 humans with pointy sticks and bad attitudes. Sir Fizz reports nervously, "The betting pools have shifted. 93% of wagers are now on the humans." "That's impossible," Klaxon protests. "They're supposed to be the underdogs. They're supposed to struggle with basic survival while the advanced species demonstrate superior adaptation capabilities." "Well," Fizz says, consulting his datapad, "the humans currently have fire, shelter, food, water, weapons, and what appears to be a primitive but effective early warning system." Meanwhile, the Zephyrians are arguing about physics, the Mucoids are hiding in a cave, and the Thornbacks are debating military procedure while their equipment dissolves in acid rain. Klaxon stares at the monitors, watching Marcus demonstrate spear-throwing techniques to an increasingly impressed galactic audience. "How is this happening? We specifically chose the most primitive species we could find." "Perhaps," Fizz suggests quietly, "we should have paid more attention to why they survived long enough to develop space travel in the first place." Down on the planet's surface, the humans are settling in for their first night with the casual confidence of a species that spent 200,000 years figuring out how to not die in horrible ways. They have fire, food, shelter, and weapons. More importantly, they have that particularly human trait of looking at any situation and immediately figuring out how to make it better, more efficient, or more dangerous. Usually all 3 at once. Day 3 arrives with all the subtlety of a cosmic intervention, which is to say it begins with something massive, angry, and thoroughly displeased with the current state of affairs crashing through the forest like nature's own wrecking ball. The creature that emerges from the tree line defies easy description, mostly because evolution on Kepler 442c apparently operates on the principle of why have one terrifying feature when you can have 12. Picture a grizzly bear that decided to major in violence with a minor in creative intimidation. Now add razor-sharp bone protrusions, bioluminescent threat displays, and the kind of roar that suggests it has strong opinions about the presence of alien tourists in its neighborhood. The technical term, according to the planet's wildlife database, is apex stalker. The practical term, as Marcus puts it while grabbing his spear, is big angry death machine with commitment issues. The beast's arrival triggers what can only be described as a masterclass in species-specific panic responses. The Zephyrians, still struggling with basic fire-making, immediately begin a frantic debate about the optimal crystalline formation for defense against carbon-based predators. This involves a lot of prismatic light displays and theoretical discussion while the creature gets progressively closer and more irritated. "We must establish a harmonic resonance barrier," Quartz announces with the kind of confidence that suggests they've never actually tested this theory against something with teeth. They begin humming in frequencies that probably sound very impressive to other Zephyrians, but have roughly the same effect on an angry predator as elevator music has on a rampaging bull. The Mucoids respond to imminent death with the philosophical approach that has served their species so well throughout this competition. Glomulus immediately begins analyzing the existential implications of predator-prey relationships while his teammates debate whether being eaten counts as a form of biological transcendence. Their slime trail, still glowing like a neon dinner invitation, ensures that even if they somehow escape this predator, they'll attract several more within the hour. "Perhaps," Glomulus muses while backing slowly toward a cliff, "we should consider the ethical dimensions of denying this creature its natural dietary requirements." The Thornbacks at least attempt a military response, which is to say they instantly form a defensive formation that would be absolutely perfect if they were facing an enemy that attacks according to standard galactic combat protocols. Unfortunately, the apex stalker never attended military academy and has no interest in engaging in honorable warfare according to established conventions. Mandible shouts tactical commands that assume the creature will politely approach from the designated engagement zone and wait for proper defensive countermeasures to be implemented. When the beast instead decides to leap directly into the middle of their formation, the Thornbacks discover that their rigid command structure works great right up until someone needs to make a split-second decision that isn't covered in the tactical manual. And then there are the humans. Marcus takes one look at 12 feet of angry predator and grins like someone just told him Christmas came early. "Luna, how long for boomsticks?" he calls out, hefting his spear and moving to flank the creature. 2 minutes for the small ones, 5 for anything impressive, Luna replies, already digging through her improvised toolkit. She's been spending her spare time crafting what she cheerfully calls chemistry experiments using local minerals and organic compounds. The fact that most of her experiments involve controlled explosions is apparently just a happy coincidence. "Pete, you got range on this thing?" Marcus continues, never taking his eyes off the beast as it swipes at the panicking Thornbacks. "Give me 30 seconds, Pete responds, already stringing the bow he carved yesterday. Unlike the regulation survival equipment the other species received, Pete's bow was crafted using techniques his grandfather learned from his grandfather, going back through generations of humans who understood that sometimes you need to put sharp things into distant targets with extreme prejudice. What happens next is a masterclass in human tactical coordination that probably violates several galactic conventions on the ethical treatment of wildlife. Marcus doesn't charge the creature head-on like some primitive berserker. Instead, he uses what the Marine Corps calls applied creativity, and what everyone else calls terrifying competence. He starts by throwing rocks. Not just any rocks, mind you, but carefully selected projectiles aimed at specific points on the creature's anatomy designed to irritate rather than injure. The beast, already annoyed by the presence of alien tourists, becomes absolutely furious at this additional insult and charges toward Marcus with the kind of single-minded determination that makes it completely ignore Pete's first arrow. The arrow doesn't kill the creature, but it does accomplish something much more tactically valuable. It hurts enough to make the beast stumble, which gives Marcus the opening he needs to get behind it with his spear. Not to attack, mind you, but to provide what military strategists call target designation and everyone else calls standing exactly where Luna needs you to be. Luna's first improvised explosive isn't designed to kill the creature either. It's designed to make a very loud noise in a very specific location, which causes the already confused and angry predator to turn toward the sound just as Pete's second arrow finds the soft tissue behind its front leg. The beast staggers, roars and turns to face this new threat, which puts it in perfect position for Marcus to drive his spear into the sweet spot where neck meets shoulder. Not deep enough to hit anything vital, but deep enough to make the creature very aware that it's facing something that knows exactly where to put sharp objects for maximum effectiveness. What follows is not a battle in any traditional sense. It's a systematic demonstration of how 3 humans with primitive weapons can turn a 12-foot killing machine into dinner through the application of teamwork, tactical thinking, and the kind of creative problem-solving that their species developed during several million years of being smaller and weaker than everything that wanted to eat them. The other contestants watch in horrified fascination as the humans don't just kill the creature, they make it look easy. Marcus coordinates the attack with hand signals that require no technology and no translation. Luna provides explosives timed to the second based on nothing but observation and experience. Pete puts arrows exactly where they need to go using a weapon he built from scratch with tools that would have been familiar to his ancestors 3,000 years ago. When it's over, the humans don't celebrate like primitive savages who got lucky. They immediately begin field dressing the carcass with the efficient competence of people who understand that victory means nothing if you don't properly manage the resources it provides. "Well," Marcus says, wiping blood from his spear, "looks like we're having steak tonight." In orbit, producer Claxon stares at the monitors in stunned silence. His primitive species just took down a creature that's killed 6 previous contestants from supposedly advanced civilizations. They didn't just survive the encounter, they turned it into a tactical exercise and then immediately began processing it for food. Sir Fizz whispers, "The other contestants are requesting emergency extraction." Claxon doesn't respond. He's too busy watching the humans demonstrate the proper technique for preserving meat using nothing but salt, smoke and knowledge passed down through generations of ancestors who understood that survival isn't about having the best technology. It's about having the best instincts for staying alive when everything else is trying to make you dead. The aliens are finally beginning to understand that they're not competing against primitives. They're competing against the end result of 4 billion years of evolutionary pressure applied to a species that refused to go extinct no matter what the universe threw at them. And the humans are just getting started. Day 4 begins with what Pete calls the teaching moment, though anyone familiar with human history would recognize it as something far more sinister: the systematic psychological dismantling of the competition through the application of helpful advice. The humans have spent the morning expanding their camp into what can only be described as a primitive fortress. They've got defensive positions, food storage, water purification, and what appears to be the beginnings of a small-scale manufacturing operation. More importantly, they've got that particular human combination of confidence and boredom that historically leads to either great art or terrible wars. In this case, it leads to Marcus deciding that their fellow contestants look like they could use some friendly guidance. "You know," Marcus says, wandering over to the Zephyrian camp with the casual air of someone dropping by to borrow a cup of sugar, "I couldn't help but notice you folks are still having some trouble with the whole fire situation." Quartz, who has spent the last 3 days trying to achieve combustion through crystalline resonance theory, looks up with a mixture of desperation and wounded pride. "Our photosynthetic metabolism is optimized for direct stellar energy absorption. These primitive combustion methods are incompatible with our biological framework." Right, Marcus nods sympathetically. "That's a real problem. Tell you what though, fire isn't really about biology. It's about chemistry. See, you're thinking about this all wrong." He picks up 2 sticks and demonstrates the bow drill method with the patience of a kindergarten teacher explaining arithmetic to someone who insists that mathematics is a conspiracy. "You're trying to create plasma," Marcus continues. "But what you actually need is just enough heat to reach the ignition point of your tinder. That's only about 400 degrees Celsius. Basic friction can get you there, no problem." He hands the bow drill to Quartz. "Here, give it a try. Remember, it's not about how hard you press, it's about consistency and speed." What follows is perhaps the most condescending tutorial in galactic history. Marcus, with infinite patience and absolutely zero awareness of how insulting this is, teaches a member of a civilization that mastered faster than light travel how to make fire using the same technique human children learn at summer camp. The worst part, from Quartz's perspective, is that it works. Within 10 minutes they've got a small but steady flame, and Marcus is beaming at them like a proud parent whose toddler just managed to use the bathroom without assistance. "There you go. See, you just needed to think about it from a different angle. Your species probably never needed to develop these techniques, because you had all that stellar energy. Nothing wrong with that, it's just a different evolutionary path." Quartz stares at the fire with the expression of someone whose entire worldview has just been gently but thoroughly demolished by a creature who learned this skill before he could properly tie his shoes. Meanwhile, Luna has decided to help the mucoids with their predator problem, which she approaches with the kind of scientific methodology that would make Darwin weep with pride. "So your bioluminescence attracts predators," she observes, watching Glomulus nervously eye the tree line. "That's actually a fascinating evolutionary adaptation. Probably served as a communication method or mate selection display on your homeworld, right?" "Indeed," Glomulus replies, clearly pleased that someone appreciates the sophistication of his species' biological features. "Our luminescent secretions convey complex philosophical and emotional concepts through biochemical markers." "That's amazing," Luna says with genuine enthusiasm. "But here's the thing about evolution, it's all about environmental adaptation. What works in one environment might be a liability in another." She produces a handful of mud mixed with crushed leaves. "This is basically natural camouflage paint. It'll mask your bioluminescence without interfering with your biochemistry." She demonstrates by smearing the mixture on a rock, effectively dulling its surface reflectivity. "The principle is simple absorption and scattering. Your light still gets produced, but it doesn't escape to signal predators. Think of it as evolutionary camouflage." Glomulus stares at the mud with the expression of someone who has just discovered that the solution to his species' most pressing survival problem was literally lying on the ground the entire time. "This is actually quite ingenious for such a primitive approach." "Primitive?" Luna laughs. "This is advanced biological warfare. My species has been using environmental modification for survival advantages for thousands of years. We just call it not being stupid about obvious problems." The casual way she delivers this verbal uppercut, combined with the fact that her solution is both elegant and immediately effective, leaves Glomulus questioning everything he thought he knew about the relationship between technological advancement and practical intelligence. But it's Pete who delivers the most devastating psychological blow to the Thornbacks, and he does it with the kind of folksy wisdom that makes it impossible to argue with. He finds them still engaged in their endless debates about proper military protocol, now expanded to include heated discussions about resource allocation, perimeter security, and the chain of command implications of their current tactical situation. They've been arguing for so long that they haven't actually eaten anything in 18 hours. You folks seem pretty organized, Pete observes, settling down nearby with a piece of roasted meat from yesterday's hunt. Real professional operation you got here. Mandible straightens with pride. We maintain the highest standards of military discipline and tactical efficiency. I can see that. Pete nods approvingly. Reminds me of my old army days. We had procedures for everything too. He takes a bite of meat and chews thoughtfully. Course we also had this saying, an army marches on its stomach. You know what that means. Efficient logistics are essential for maintaining combat effectiveness. Chiton responds immediately. Exactly. Pete grins. And you can't have efficient logistics if you spend all your time talking about efficient logistics instead of actually organizing efficient logistics. He holds up his meal. See, while you folks have been working out the proper protocols for food acquisition and distribution, you haven't actually acquired or distributed any food. The Thornbacks exchange glances that would be uncomfortable if they weren't currently being delivered by creatures with compound eyes. Now I'm not criticizing, Pete continues with the kind of helpful tone that makes criticism absolutely devastating. It's just that sometimes the best military strategy is to stop strategizing and start doing. Back home we call that common sense, but I'm sure you folks have a fancier term for it. He finishes his meal and stands up, brushing crumbs from his hands. Tell you what though. When you get done figuring out your food protocols, come on over to our camp. We've got plenty to share and I can show you some old-fashioned military techniques that don't require any paperwork. The offer is delivered with such genuine friendliness that it takes the Thornbacks several minutes to realize they've just been systematically humiliated by a farmer who learned military tactics from his grandfather's war stories. Back in orbit, producer Claxon watches this psychological warfare unfold with the growing realization that his career is about to become a cautionary tale told in film schools across the galaxy. Sir Fizz reports, the other contestants are exhibiting signs of severe morale deterioration. The Zephyrians are questioning their technological superiority. The Mukoids are having an existential crisis about primitive versus advanced survival strategies. And the Thornbacks appear to be experiencing some kind of command structure breakdown. And the humans? Claxon asks, though he's not sure he wants to know the answer. The humans appear to be enjoying themselves. They've established themselves as the de facto survival experts, and are systematically teaching everyone else how to not die. The irony levels are approaching critical mass. Claxon stares at the monitors, watching Marcus demonstrate advanced knot-tying techniques to a group of aliens whose civilizations mastered quantum mechanics before humans figured out agriculture. How did this happen? We chose them because they were supposed to be the most primitive species available. Perhaps, Fizz suggests carefully, we should have considered the difference between primitive technology and primitive survival skills. The humans seem to have quite advanced survival skills. They've just been using them for so long they don't think of them as advanced anymore. Down on the planet's surface, the humans continue their campaign of helpful devastation. They're not just winning the competition anymore. They're redefining what it means to be evolved. One condescending tutorial at a time. And the most terrifying part, from the aliens' perspective, is that the humans genuinely think they're being helpful. They're not trying to humiliate anyone. They're just sharing knowledge with less capable species, the same way they might help a lost child or an injured animal. The fact that this makes the psychological warfare even more effective is just another example of why humans are the kind of species that other civilizations really should have researched more thoroughly before inviting them to participate in survival competitions. Day 7 arrives with all the fanfare of a funeral march, at least from the perspective of everyone who isn't human. The final day of the Galactic Survival Championship was supposed to be a dramatic culmination of primitive species pushing themselves to their absolute limits. Instead, it resembles a nature documentary where the apex predators have decided to open a consulting business. The human camp has evolved into something that would make a military engineer weep with professional admiration. They've got defensive fortifications that would stop anything short of artillery, a food storage system that could feed them for weeks, and what appears to be a primitive but functional workshop where Luna has been crafting increasingly sophisticated tools using nothing but local materials and the kind of engineering knowledge that comes from a species that spent 10,000 years figuring out how to make everything better, faster and more dangerous. More importantly, they've got what every military strategist recognizes as the most decisive advantage in any conflict. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. Marcus has been using his spare time to scout the entire region, mapping resources and potential threats with the thoroughness of someone who understands that knowledge is the difference between living and dying. Pete has established what can only be described as a primitive agricultural operation, because apparently even on an alien death world, his instinct is to make things grow. Luna has been conducting what she cheerfully calls applied chemistry experiments, which have resulted in a collection of tools, weapons, and explosive devices that would have been considered advanced technology by human standards 3 centuries ago. The other contestants, meanwhile, are discovering what it means to be completely outclassed by a species they still technically consider primitive. The Zephyrians have managed to maintain fire thanks to Marcus's tutorial, but they're still struggling with basic concepts like food acquisition and shelter construction. Quartz spends most of their time staring at the human camp with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of technological superiority has been gently but thoroughly demolished by creatures who make tools out of rocks and seem genuinely confused about why this is considered impressive. The Mucoids have solved their predator problem using Luna's camouflage techniques, but they've discovered that survival involves more than just not being eaten. Glomulus has begun what can only be described as an existential crisis about the nature of advancement, spending hours contemplating whether a species that can't survive without technology should really be considered more evolved than one that can thrive with nothing but their bare hands and bad attitudes. The Thornbacks have finally stopped arguing about military protocols, mainly because they've run out of things to argue about. Their rigid command structure has completely collapsed under the weight of its own bureaucracy, leaving them with the uncomfortable realization that all their advanced tactical training is useless when you can't even manage basic logistics. Mandible has been quietly observing the human camp with the growing understanding that real military effectiveness has nothing to do with fancy procedures and everything to do with getting things done efficiently under adverse conditions. And then producer Klaxon makes the decision that will probably end his career but might just save his life. "We're changing the rules," he announces to his production team with the desperate authority of someone who has just realized that his reality show is about to become a documentary about alien incompetence. "Sir," Fizz asks nervously. "New challenge. Combat scenario. We're dropping in some automated defense drones. Military-grade equipment. This will level the playing field and give the advanced species a chance to demonstrate their superior tactical capabilities. It's a desperate move, and everyone in the command center knows it. But the alternative is watching the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy get schooled by 3 humans with pointy sticks for another 3 hours of live television." The drones deploy with military precision, sleek metallic predators designed to test the tactical capabilities of advanced civilizations. They're equipped with energy weapons, advanced sensors, and tactical AI that should make them more than a match for any primitive species armed with Stone Age technology. The other contestants react to this development with varying degrees of panic and relief. Finally, a challenge that requires advanced thinking, tactical coordination, and the kind of sophisticated problem-solving that their superior civilizations are famous for. The humans react by immediately going to work. "Combat drones," Marcus observes, watching the metallic shapes move through the forest with the practiced eye of someone who has spent years figuring out how to break things that were designed not to be broken. "Luna, what do you think?" "Standard search and destroy pattern." "Looks like it," Luna replies, already mentally cataloging the drone's movement patterns, sensor configurations, and probable weak points. "Thermal imaging, motion detection, probably some kind of acoustic sensors. Standard military package. How many of your boomsticks we got left?" Pete asks, stringing his bow with the casual efficiency of someone who has never met a problem that couldn't be solved by putting sharp objects into it from a safe distance. "Enough," Luna grins, and there's something in that smile that suggests the drones are about to discover why humans have a reputation for turning every tool into a weapon and every weapon into a better weapon. What follows is not a battle, it's a systematic demonstration of why humans became the apex predators on a planet where everything else was bigger, stronger, and better armed. The drones are sophisticated pieces of military hardware, designed by advanced civilizations and equipped with technology that should make them invincible against primitive opponents. They have one critical weakness that their designers never considered: they were programmed by species that never had to fight for survival against opponents who treated warfare as a creative art form. Marcus doesn't try to fight the drones head-on. Instead, he uses the same tactics that allowed his ancestors to hunt mammoths with pointy sticks: patience, planning, and the kind of creative thinking that comes from a species that spent millions of years being smaller and weaker than everything that wanted to kill them. He starts by studying their patrol patterns, identifying their sensor ranges, and mapping their behavioral algorithms. This takes exactly 15 minutes, because humans have been reverse engineering their enemies' capabilities since before they figured out agriculture. Luna contributes her own special brand of problem solving by creating what she calls environmental modifications. These include strategically placed explosive charges, improvised electromagnetic pulse devices crafted from local minerals, and a series of traps that would make a medieval siege engineer weep with professional admiration. Pete provides what military strategists call precision fire support, and everyone else calls putting arrows exactly where they need to go. His handmade bow might be primitive by galactic standards, but it's operated by someone who learned marksmanship from a species that spent 10,000 years figuring out how to hit small targets at impossible distances using nothing but muscle memory and applied physics. The first drone goes down when Marcus lures it into one of Luna's electromagnetic traps. The sophisticated AI that was supposed to make it invincible gets fried by a device that looks like it was assembled by a particularly creative caveman but operates on principles that would impress a quantum physicist. The second drone gets taken out by Pete's arrows, which shouldn't be able to penetrate military-grade armor but somehow manage to find the tiny gaps in its sensor array that Luna identified during her 15-minute technical analysis. The third drone falls victim to what Marcus calls applied creativity. A combination of misdirection, environmental manipulation, and the kind of tactical thinking that treats every piece of terrain as a potential weapon. The entire engagement lasts less than 20 minutes. When it's over, the humans are examining the disabled drones with the professional interest of mechanics looking at particularly well-designed engines, while the other contestants stare in stunned silence at the wreckage of what was supposed to be their salvation. Not bad engineering, Luna observes, poking at the drone's sensor array. Bit overcomplicated though. All these fancy systems create multiple failure points. Sometimes simple is better. In orbit, producer Claxon stares at the monitors with the expression of someone who has just watched his career commit suicide on live television. His military-grade combat drones, designed to challenge advanced civilizations, have been systematically dismantled by 3 humans using weapons that wouldn't look out of place in a Stone Age museum. Sir Fizz whispers, the viewership numbers are at record highs. Everyone in the galaxy is watching this. Watching what? Claxon asks, though he's afraid he already knows the answer. Watching humanity redefine what it means to be an advanced species. The betting pools have closed. Nobody's willing to bet against the humans anymore. Down on the planet's surface, the competition is effectively over. The other contestants have given up any pretense of actually competing and are now just trying to survive until the rescue ships arrive. The humans, meanwhile, are settling in for what Pete describes as the most relaxing camping trip we've had in years. They've got food, shelter, weapons, and complete tactical superiority over everything on the planet. More importantly, they've got that particularly human satisfaction that comes from solving problems that everyone else thought were impossible. You know, Marcus says, watching the sunset from their fortified camp, this was actually kind of fun. We should do this again sometime. Maybe next time they'll give us a real challenge. Luna adds, putting the finishing touches on what appears to be a primitive but functional radio transmitter. I don't know, Pete muses, carving arrows for a bow he's been crafting in his spare time. Sometimes it's nice to just go back to basics. Reminds you where you came from. The rescue ships arrive the next morning to find the human contestants relaxing around their campfire, sharing stories and planning improvements to their camp that they'll never have time to implement. The other survivors are huddled in whatever shelter they manage to construct, looking like refugees from a natural disaster that happened to be televised. The humans board the rescue ship with the casual air of people finishing a pleasant vacation. They're polite to the crew, grateful for the transport, and spend the journey home swapping stories about techniques they want to try next time. The other contestants board their ships with the shell-shocked expressions of people who have just discovered that everything they thought they knew about survival, technology, and evolutionary superiority was wrong. The show gets cancelled before the ships reach orbit. The Galactic Broadcasting Consortium releases a statement claiming creative differences and budget constraints, but everyone knows the real reason. No species in the galaxy wants to be the next group of advanced civilizations to get embarrassed by humans with pointy sticks. The humans return to Earth with prize money they didn't really need, and a reputation they didn't really want. Within 6 months, human becomes galactic slang for inexplicably dangerous, despite appearing primitive. Within a year, 3 separate alien civilizations add Earth to their do not contact lists, not because humans are hostile but because they're the kind of species that makes everyone else feel incompetent just by existing. And somewhere in Iowa, Pete Thompson goes back to farming with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows that no matter how advanced the galaxy gets, sometimes the old ways are still the best ways. Especially when the old ways involve making everything into a weapon and refusing to die no matter what the universe throws at you. Because that's what humans do. They survive. They adapt. They thrive. And they make it look so easy that everyone else starts questioning whether they're really as advanced as they thought they were. The universe is a big dangerous place full of species that have mastered faster than light travel, quantum mechanics, and the fundamental forces of reality itself. But only one species has mastered the art of not being dead when everything else wants to kill them. And that, as it turns out, makes all the difference.